What's happening, everybody? JayShockblast here, and today we got some pretty interesting news out of the world of Marvel Comics. That is right, the title is correct. Frank Castle, aka The Punisher, is your new War Machine, and I am on the fence on this one. On one hand, I think about War Machine and the name War Machine and just everything that it implies, and I can't think of a better person to wear that suit than Frank Castle. I mean, Frank Castle is a war machine. He is just a one-man army, and he single-handedly destroys everything. Like, I almost feel like giving him a War Machine's armor is like easy mode, you know? Like, but on the other hand, it's replacing a character with another character, and I typically, across the board, don't necessarily love that. I think this is a fitting one, though, and to kind of get us to how we got here, we start with Civil War II. There was a huge battle with Thanos, and War Machine and She-Hulk are dead or perceived dead because of it. She-Hulk almost dies, but War Machine does. And it's a very pivotal point in the story, because at the center of Civil War II is Tony Stark versus Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. So I understand why they used War Machine, because it's a character that was extremely important to both of them. You know, for Carol Danvers, she was dating James Rhodes at the time. Like, they were together romantically. So it really kind of puts her over the edge. And for Tony Stark, I mean, that's his right-hand man, that's his wingman, that's his boy. And they've been together for so long, and they both take it extremely hard. So from that perspective, they made it make sense. Because there are a few characters that they would have been able to make elicit that type of emotional response and cause the conflict. At the time, I did not love it, because one of Marvel's biggest pushes right now is diversity, and I'm all for that. Like, I just don't love the way that they're approaching it, and it rubbed me as strange that, you know, they had this massive cast of characters to choose from, and the ones that they chose to kill off were a black character and a female character, when they're trying to bring more female characters and people of color into the comic universe. So it was just really strange to me that they would take those two characters off the board. So I didn't love it at the time. Again, it's one of those things that really makes sense for the story. And obviously they had a long game here, because I feel like when they did it, they knew that ultimately it would bring us to where we are now with Secret Empire. Now, I'm not up to date on Secret Empire. I have kind of gotten myself a Cliff Notes version of what's going on, and it looks as though Frank Castle has sided with Captain Hydra, aka Captain America Steve Rogers, and he is, you know, out there hunting, you know, the resistance, if you will. I don't know what they're calling themselves. During the process, Black Widow has severely injured his legs to the point where he's crippled. I don't want to say paralyzed, but he's crippled. He's not able to use his legs anymore. So putting him in the War Machine armor makes a lot of sense. Like, putting him in some type of Iron Man armor. It's a mantle, quote unquote, that's not being used. It's recognizable, especially in the movies. So in a lot of ways, this is a part of the story that is perfectly rational and makes a lot of sense. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty intrigued by it. If James Rhodes has to be dead and they have to fill the War Machine armor, please tell me somebody that's better than Frank Castle to put in that armor. You know, that makes sense for this storyline. There just isn't anybody, you know, and I think it's just as fitting as putting Sam Wilson in the Captain America costume, you know, like putting him in that role. That made a lot of sense at the time, and it's one of the few changes that they've made that I've actually really agreed with and not really had a problem with. I've actually liked it. But obviously, here's where kind of the the delicacy of the subject comes into play. It is a white character taking the role that was previously filled by a black character. And I've seen a lot of reaction in articles and across the internet of people that are upset by this. And I feel like these are the same people that were praising Marvel for changing other roles. But now that it's a black character, their role being filled by a white character, it's suddenly not acceptable. It's not good. And I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way. Like, I don't really care what color my characters are, as long as they're fun and interesting. Like, that's all that matters to me. I would rather James Rhodes be in the War Machine armor, but like, if you're gonna change it, just have it make sense. That's like always been my argument. And the ones that I've always struggled with are the ones that just don't make sense. Like Jane Foster as Thor, like taking the man's name away from him never made sense to me, especially when the hammer specifically said those deemed worthy will possess the power of Thor, not take his name. And I know they're killing off Jane Foster at some point soon, allegedly, and there's an interesting story there, I'm sure. And I would actually, I don't know if I feel like I made a video about that, but I'm not positive. I never had a problem with Jane Foster as a powerful Asgardian character. I just always felt like she should have had her own path, and they did her a disservice by using the name Thor as a crutch. I don't think they're using War Machine as a crutch here. Like Amadeus Cho as Hulk, totally using Hulk as a crutch. They could have done a million things with him as a character without bringing Hulk into it. There's plenty of other, race changes and sex changes that I just haven't understood or made sense of. I don't even know the female Quasar's name, but like, having Wendell Vaughn give up the quantum bands literally came out of nowhere, made absolutely no sense. He's just like, I don't want to do it anymore. Poof, we got a female character. So those are the type of situations that drive me nuts. If it fits the story and it really makes sense, then I'm fine with it. I never would have had a problem with Jane Foster having Thor's powers if they just called her something else. They didn't have to call her Thor. They didn't have to take Thor Odinson's name. That's the part that I always disagreed with. So I guess why I'm bringing that up is because, each situation has to be looked at differently, independently, and by itself. Like, I've resigned myself to the fact that, there are going to be changes, and, I just want them to make sense. And Frank Castle being War Machine is a natural transition. It makes sense, and it's probably going to be a good story. And ultimately, it's not going to matter because there's a cosmic cube that caused all of this, and we all know by the time Infinity Wars rolls around that we're going to have everybody back to normal. It's going to fix itself. I have been saying all along that once Thor Ragnarok rolls around, everything is going to be back to normal, and look at what's happening. Jane Foster the Imposter is going away. Not a shocker. Okay? So I think ultimately the problem is that Marvel is just not their approach to diversifying the roster is making everybody kind of cynical to what they're doing. I guess my biggest complaint is if you defend one, gender bender or race changing, character situation, you kind of have to be okay with all of them. And I kind of think it's a little hypocritical that there are people that are looking at this and saying, I can't believe they're putting a white guy in a black character's role. I think that's my biggest problem because I think it's hypocritical. I think those same people are the ones that would have been completely okay if they put James Rhodes in the Iron Man armor, which, if he was alive, I actually would have kind of liked instead of Victor Von Doom, or even Riri Williams. But the obvious heir to the Iron Man, mantle is dead. So again, just have it make sense and I can get behind it. but they do a poor job of creating new characters, which ultimately is what I want them to do. They're not doing it because of a lot of reasons, and it all goes back to rights and Jack Kirby and all things like that. You know, having to pay royalties and none of the artists or writers wanting to create new characters that they can't own. So it's such a weird place. So that's why you see all these mantle changes instead of a lot of new characters that, you know, aren't, because I don't know. I just don't want to, like, I just want to see everything make sense. You know, Moon Girl has become a very popular character that Marvel Comics has pushed, and they basically took a dead role for Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur that most people probably had never heard of. I know I'm one of them. And they modernized it and put it with, you know, quite frankly, an interesting character. And that's a great example of how you do it. But, like, there's just so many others that never really resonated or made sense. And I think this one makes sense. Would I rather see James Rhodes as War Machine? Absolutely. I mean, and ultimately we're going to get back to that point at some point. So I guess I would say let's just see what happens. And, you know, it could certainly be a very interesting story. So, anyway, I'm trying to be delicate because I understand anytime you talk about race, it can cause a million different reactions. And I just want interesting characters. I don't care, like, who they love, where they come from, what they look like. Just give me interesting characters, and let's just enjoy it. So, love to know what you guys think. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see ya.